The Tharvan Desert did not forgive mistakes. It did not forgive the small ones, a miscalculated water ration, a sandstorm ignored. And it certainly did not forgive the enormous, calculated cruelties that beings with power sometimes dressed up as necessity. The twin sons of Keth-Durrell burned without mercy across 400 kilometers of pale crimson sand, and in the middle of all that beautiful, killing nothing, a girl lay against a broken rock and waited to die. Her name was Lena. She was 14 years old by Tharvan reckoning, perhaps 16 by Earth's, and she was Vorkai, which meant her skin carried the deep violet iridescence of her species, and her secondary eyes, the amber ones that sat just above her temples, were half-lidded now with exhaustion. Her left leg was encased from hip to ankle in a medical brace, cracked down the middle from the transport crash 2 days ago, its power cell dead. Without it, the leg was useless. The bone had fused wrong in childhood, the result of a fever no physician on her homeworld had bothered to treat aggressively enough, because she was a baron's daughter and barons were not supposed to have imperfect children. Baron Vorsulkai had taken her on this survey expedition because his new consort had insisted the girl needed fresh air. 2 days in, the transport had hit a subsurface fault and broken apart. The Baron had survived. He had a working emergency shuttle. He had taken his consort, his advisors, and his political reputation, and he had left Lena beside a rock with one canteen and a datapad that no longer connected to anything. The datapad still had power, though, and it still had her books. Lena had read the same chapter of the Analects of Stars 14 times since yesterday. Not because she loved it, she found it insufferably dense, but because reading felt like doing something, and doing something felt like refusing, however quietly, to simply stop. She did not hear the rover at first. The wind carried sound strangely in the Tharvan Desert, bouncing it off dune ridges and swallowing it in troughs, and she had begun to hallucinate a little from the heat. So when the shape appeared on the ridge above her, a rust-colored, dented, very human-built geological survey rover, trailing a cloud of red dust, she assumed it was the heat playing tricks. Then it stopped. A figure climbed out. He was tall for a human, though not particularly tall by galactic standards. Mid-30s, Lena guessed. He wore a sand-rated envirosuit with the helmet visor flipped up, the kind of casual confidence about local conditions that meant either experience or recklessness. He had a beard that had lost track of its original intentions, and he was holding a hand scanner, and when the scanner pointed in her direction, he stopped walking and stared. "Hey," he called out in trade common. His accent was flat and strange. "Hey, are you hurt?" Lena stared at him. "I can see you," he added, as though she might be unaware of this. The scanner's reading a life sign. "I wasn't sure what. Some of the local fauna runs warm." He took a few steps closer. "Are you okay?" It was such an extraordinarily stupid question, given that she was a teenage girl alone in a desert with a broken medical brace, that Lena almost laughed. "No," she said. His name was Noah. He told her this while he was already moving, coming down the slope with the careful speed of someone who knew how to move across sand without starting a slide. He had a secondary canteen clipped to his belt. He unclipped it before he'd even reached her, held it out without ceremony, and said, "Small sips. Your body can't process fast intake in this heat." "I know," she said, but she took the canteen. "Geological survey," he said, answering the question she hadn't asked yet, crouching to look at the brace. "I'm mapping subterranean fault activity. This whole area is unstable. There was a transport collapse 2 days ago about 30 clicks north." He looked up. "Were you on that transport?" "Yes." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked in the direction she'd come from, and then at the single half-empty canteen beside her, and he put together the arithmetic of it without asking her to explain. His expression didn't change. That was what she remembered afterward, that it didn't change into pity or discomfort or the particular careful blankness that people used when they were performing sympathy. He just looked briefly, very quietly, angry, and then he put that away and focused on the brace. "Structural crack," he muttered. "Power cells fried. Do you know what model this is?" She told him. He went back to the rover and came back with a portable power unit and a roll of thermal bonding tape. He worked on the brace for 11 minutes. She counted, talking while he did, not at her, but sort of alongside her, the way someone talks when they're concentrating and speaking out loud helps them think. He described the fault mapping project. He'd been contracted by a Kethdural Geological Institute to survey the subsurface fracture networks after a series of unusual tremors. Humans, he explained without particular pride, had gotten very good at this kind of work. Something about Earth's own complicated tectonic history. Centuries of living on a planet that regularly tried to shake their cities down had made them meticulous. "Try that," he said when he'd finished. The brace hummed. Lena stood, carefully, and the leg held. She had not stood in 2 days. She hadn't been sure she ever would again. She said nothing for a moment. She was 14, 16, and she was not going to cry in front of a stranger, and she was not going to say thank you in a voice that embarrassed her. So she looked at the datapad in her hands instead and breathed until she was sure of herself. "You were reading," Noah said. He'd noticed the datapad. "The Analects of Stars," she said. "It's very boring. Never heard of it. You haven't missed anything." He laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of him, and it changed his face entirely. "Come on," he said. "The rover's got climate control, and I've got about 400 field rations that taste exactly like cardboard, but they'll keep you alive until I can get you to the survey station." She followed him up the slope. The brace worked. Her leg held. The twin suns were still merciless, but the rover's shadow fell across her, and she stepped into it. "The Analects of Stars," Noah said, starting the engine. "What's it about?" "Governance theory," she said. "Post-colonial administrative structures in multi-species confederacies." He glanced at her sideways. "How old are you?" 14. "And you're reading governance theory for fun? I told you it's boring." "I was reading it because it was all I had." He considered this. "Okay, but do you actually find that stuff interesting? As a subject?" Lena thought about it. She thought about the 2 days alone, and the brace, and her father's shuttle rising through the atmosphere without her. She thought about the datapad and the 14 times she had read the same chapter, not because she loved it, but because even boring ideas had been better company than despair. "Yes," she said. "I think I might." Noah nodded, like this was a perfectly ordinary and acceptable thing to say. "There's a university on Kethduril's second continent," he said. "Multi-species intake. I've done 3 contracts for the geology department. The political science faculty is supposed to be good. One of my colleagues got her daughter a scholarship there." Lena looked at him. He was watching the desert, navigating by instinct between the fault ridges that his scanner flagged, calm as if they were having this conversation in a library. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because," he said simply, "someone who reads governance theory in a desert to avoid giving up seems like someone who should know her options." Lena turned back to the window. The crimson sand moved past in slow waves. The suns began, barely, to lower. She had been left behind because she was inconvenient, because she was imperfect, because a cracked brace and a fused bone were, to a man like her father, a poor reflection on him, a flaw in otherwise presentable property. She had been found by a human in a dented rover who fixed her brace with thermal tape and asked what she liked to read. She filed that away. She would think about it later, carefully, the way she thought about the dense pages of the Analects, turning it over, examining the structure of it, trying to understand what it meant about how power worked and what it meant about what power sometimes overlooked. Outside the rover, the Tharvan desert rolled on, beautiful and indifferent. Inside it, Lena drank water in small sips and began, very cautiously, to think about the future.